Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis Reed-Lamoreaux. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Reed-Lamoreaux.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding their balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world, and I want to welcome you to today's episode, which is a mashup where I have three wonderful guests, and I'll introduce them to you very soon. Hey, if you haven't already checked out the Facebook group or the LinkedIn page, Leadership is Changing, love to see you in those different communities. Feel free to join us there for sure. Hey, the other thing too is if you'd like to share this episode with three other people, that'd be wonderful. That'll really help the podcast, the show, and also help a lot of people with the knowledge and experience and the insights that our guests are sharing with the listeners. Three wonderful guests, as I said today, from episode 19. This is Dr. Alex Vincent. He's a Senior Vice President for Leadership Transformation at LHH, and he shares some wonderful insights. Episode 20, Denise Reed-Lamoreaux. Denise is the Global Chief Diversity Officer at Outsource. Outsource is an IT company. And of course, my last guest is episode 22, Kevin Bonfield. He is the founder of an organization called Consenta. It's a boutique consulting company. And all three share some wonderful insights. So team, I'm going to encourage you now to take notes. Listen to these three different speakers or people that I've interviewed on the podcast in the past from episode 19, 20, and 22. Sit back, relax, and take notes and listen to Alex, Denise, and Kevin. Hey, listeners, I'm here with Dr. Alex Vincent, and we're talking about leadership is changing, and he's sharing some great wisdom and insights here. Alex, who is your favorite leader? Now, this person could be alive or from history. So who is your favorite leader and why?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I kind of thought about that a little bit because I have a few favorites, right? So I don't have just one favorite. I have a few. But one which I'd like to point to is Sara Blakely. And Sara Blakely is the founder and owner of Sparks, which is a woman's apparel company. And I'll just use her as an example of the leaders that I tend to appreciate. One of the things that Sara comes across when she speaks is she's very authentic. She's very real. So she'll share her story in a very open way, and she'll be really upfront about, how she launched her company, how she created a company, and all the work that she did to actually get there. And you also get the sense that she's a very people-oriented person. So what she talks about is you really have to love your clients. And I really love that perspective because I think about clients in a bunch of different ways. So there's the actual clients that I work with, and I love them in a way where I really want them to succeed, right? I'm literally like the coach. If you think about Jurgen Klopp, the Liverpool coach, they just won. You can tell that he really loves his players. He really wants them to succeed. He really wants them to do well. Sarah's the same way. And I think the modern leader or the modern coach or whatever, I think really wants their clients, their team members, their stakeholders to succeed, right? And I love that message about really love your clients. And I take that really love your team members and love them in a way where you're there for them and you want the best for them. And then that authenticity and that vulnerability, I think is, so before COVID, I think that was always important, right? I think that came up through a whole bunch of the evolution of leadership, where it's evolved into the positive psychology, giving positive feedback, really helping team members get the best out of them. But I think along with that, because that could be more of like the carrot, the carrot, the carrot, the carrot. But I think along with that, we have to be ourselves. We have to be authentic. We have to be who we are. And we have to be vulnerable so that we can actually connect. See, I think if you talk about love your clients, love your team members, you actually have to connect with them. And I think the only way you can connect with another person is to actually make yourself vulnerable. You actually have to open yourself up so that the other person's going to open themselves up and you can connect with them at a personal level where you can really get to know them and where you can really say, we're going to do this together. We're in this together. It's going to be really hard. It's going to be really cool. It's going to be really exciting. And we're going to see what we can get done. And what I love about Liverpool's coach, who said, it isn't about winning. It is really about how do we want to win and how do we go about failing, right? So there's this whole thing about being humble. Sometimes we're going to win. Sometimes we're going to lose. We're not going to win all the time. We're not going to succeed all the time. But how do we want to go about winning? How do we want to go about failing? Let's experiment. Let's try different things. Let's expand ourselves. So I think all the leaders that I appreciate, whether it's Sarah or Jürgen or other leaders that I appreciate, have those characteristics where they're able to really connect, they really care for, and they really want what's best for their clients, or for their team members, or for their organization. And to say, it's my job to set things up in such a way that I get the best out of all of this group of people that I'm working with.
Wow, love it. So how to connect and make yourself, by making yourself vulnerable as a leader. And then also, it's not about winning, it's about how to win. And even maybe how to lose, but it's about the way we go about it.
Yeah,
it's really important, yeah. Denise, here's a question for you, and that is, who is your favorite leader? Now, this person could be alive or from history. So who's your favorite leader and why?
So when I first looked at these questions, I was really excited by this one because this has been a person I've greatly admired ever since I was a child and first had to start doing those biography assignments in school. And the person I'm very much in admiration of is Eleanor Roosevelt. There's a lot of reasons for that. She's been called all kinds of different things through the years, but President Truman said it very well when he called her the First Lady of the World. She really had a lifelong passion for humanitarian efforts and was really very instrumental in helping the UN get its start. The legacy of her words and her work appears in the constitutions across many different nations. And still, her presence is felt in some international laws that protect the rights of men and women across the world. I was fascinated by her story, as the wife of FDR during the very critical years in the United States where this country needed strong leaders. And the fact that she started the first radio broadcast as a first lady for the women of the United States during the Depression, offering them really practical advice on how they could become more financially solvent. And just that very stepping forward, stepping out of her comfort zone is something I've always really admired. And I have one quote of hers that kind of became my mantra: do what you feel in your heart to be right, for you'll be criticized anyways. And so I think that's, a little act of bravery that all of us can take some, lessons from and try to apply when we find ourselves in those situations where we're afraid to take that next step forward.
Yeah, so many people are afraid to take their next step forward. And I think it's just a beautiful quote because, a lot of people are afraid to take their next step because of what might other people say or being criticized or the fear. And you're right. I think that's something whereby what she's saying is that it doesn't matter. Just go. People are going to say things anyhow. So just go and do it. And I think that is a perfect quote to sort of start things off. Hey, team, listeners, we're here with Kevin Bonfield, who's sharing some his insights and wisdom and experiences around being a leader, going from a large corporate role into his own businesses as well. Kevin, who is your favorite leader? Now, this person could be alive or from history, but who is your favorite leader and why?
So this to me is actually an incredibly challenging question, and because I've worked for what I think are some fantastic leaders, and let's just say I've worked for some not fantastic leaders as well. And then being a consultant, I get to see it almost from a displaced perspective. So I think I have a fairly well-tuned view of it, but as a result, I'm not going to go with anybody who I've worked with or who is alive today. The person whose leadership I find incredible is a Polish guy named Witold Pilecki. And his story was lost for decades, and it's only really come back up over the last couple of years. There's a book called The Auschwitz Volunteer, and he was a member of the Polish army, and he volunteered to go into Auschwitz to basically start the revolution from within the camp. And when he came out, he wrote a book, and it was basically kind of a report out to his superiors who didn't believe him because it was so incredible, lost the book, and it was only recently that it came back to light. But to me, there's a story he tells where he is so cold and wet, and he's in the middle of the grounds. He's in a terrible position, right? But he's found his purpose in life. He's found where he's supposed to be, and he's working with the people that he needs to work with to both help them survive, but then also to give them purpose as well. And I just think that combination of having a vision, being clear on his purpose, making an impact, and doing it in a place where there's no formal structures where people have to listen to him. He's having to do this all with the strength of his personality and his persuasion. And if it goes wrong, then he's likely to die. I think that he is one of the most incredible leaders that I have come to know.
Yeah, sounds like a very committed leader who had a vision, clear on his purpose, but also making that impact. And yeah, what a wonderful leader. That sounds like going out there and putting things out for, on the line, and he could have ended up not surviving. And so, yeah, really interesting. So wonderful. I mean, really interesting how that book's come out, and again will come out now because it was lost. And so, yeah. So what's the title of the book again?
The one that I've read is The Auschwitz Volunteer. I think that there's a follow-up that's coming. The Auschwitz Volunteer is very much just his report out. I think that there's a follow-up that is more about his life. But the one that I've read is The Auschwitz Volunteer, and it's a fantastic book, just in its rawness, right? Because it's him talking.
Yes. Yeah, no, great. I actually thought you were going to talk about a cricket player, an English cricket player, and I thought, lucky you didn't mention that. So, so I thought that was all good. Whoa, what an awesome mashup that's been with our three different guests that I had on the Leadership is Changing podcast in the past. Hey, team, if you haven't already listened to those 3 episodes in full, I'm going to actually really encourage you to go and listen to them. Episode 19 with Dr. Alex Vincent, the episode 20 with Denise Reed-Lamoreaux, and of course, episode 22 with Kevin Bonfield. 3 wonderful guests. Hopefully you've taken some notes, and go and check out those full episodes with them for sure. Hey, love you to share this episode and the podcast with 3 other people. When you do that, it actually helps us with our ranking in the podcast world, but also helps the show get in front of many, many other people, which means that they can actually help them find their voice and this show is the voice of impact, and it's wonderful. Hey, the other thing too is if you haven't already joined the Facebook group or the LinkedIn page, Leadership is Changing, love to see you join those 2 different platforms. So come along and do that. Hey, listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Hey, look out for the episodes as they're being published. Have a listen, put a review and a rating. And once again, share them with as many people as you can, your friend, your family, your network. Hey, if there's any feedback you'd like to give me about the show, or if there's a question you have for me to ask my guests as I interview them, or if you have a question for the Ask Dennis Freestyle episode, which happens once a week, feel free to send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. Always a pleasure being with you, listeners. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.